So we'll move on to, if you're all right
let's
with it,
do
Carl, NXT.
Ooh,
Yeah, have you got about 5 minutes, Carl?
maybe try and do it in 4.
So yeah, we probably could. So NXT, they went for a bit of a. It does have some conversation pieces for us because they've gone for a very different approach this time, and have subsequently reassured everyone that won't be the case next week. And what they did was have no matches at all. And that's got to be somewhat unprecedented. Have you ever tuned into an episode of Raw or SmackDown in your childhood, Carl, and they've gone,
not
sorry,
to my
no wrestling
knowledge.
tonight? Not to my knowledge either. They did that weird thing where Raw goes on strike, but there was still a match. And again, I know we're in a tough situation, but that being said, we've seen other people pull stuff out of the bag, and even Raw and SmackDown managed to pull some stuff out of the bag. What NXT decided to go for, and I admire them for trying something different, was just do like more of a. It felt a bit like almost like a sports sort of show where they're just doing interviews and stuff. If I'm honest with you, that sounded really like I know what I'm talking about sports for a second, isn't it? Sounded like one of those sports interview shows. But yeah, so they had Triple H and the other guy. I'm going to call him Tom. He looks like a Tom. Todd.
I'm going to call him Tom.
You know what I'm talking about, Carl. Yeah. So they had Triple H and Tom, and they were just sort of introducing each segment and then talking a little bit about each segment. And essentially what they did was the first one, which took up an inordinate amount of time. I want to say nearly an hour, maybe even more, in which they believe it or not, Carl, they talked about Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano.
Yeah.
And built up their feud. Now, what I am going to do, Carl, and this is going to surprise you, is I'm going to give this credit, and I'm also going to take that away a little bit.
Because and Antony taketh away.
This promo and this package, that's the thing. Now, the reason I want to give it credit is because it was useful for people like me, who I didn't really know about their history. And all I knew is they've wrestled each other an awful lot, right? And people were getting kind of stale with it, right? But going into the match, for me, this promo package helped because it built up the hype for that match for me, because it showed the history, it showed how close they were together, how they came up out of developmental together, how they were a tag team, how he betrayed him, and it built everything. It showed you everything. They went through it all. They had little sort of backstage interviews with each of them talking about, you know, how they did love each other and all this stuff. And I'm like, God, yeah, there's a lot of history there. It's a hell of a feud. There's a lot of bad blood. So it was good for me. The reason I take it away a little bit is because not everyone's in the same boat as me. So it's a small window of people who have gone, I've only just started watching NXT and I have no idea who these guys are. Most of the people who are watching NXT regularly already know. So I imagine it was quite boring for them. But nevertheless, we had like an hour of
I think for me, so I'm in the camp of I've seen some of the previous stuff in NXT. I'm not, as you know, I don't follow it as closely anymore. But for me, it was just like an hour. Like I think because I had seen bits of it and stuff before, it just felt like, I don't know, like it felt like a long hour. So it was like a little bit of fast forward time for me, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think if I was to watch it live, it would have annoyed the fuck out of me, to be perfectly honest, just because I have seen it all.
I'm curious, Carl. Did you watch any of NXT in normal speed, or was it all fast forward?
Being completely honest, yeah, I don't think I watched much of it in normal speed.
Yeah, because it's all very much like this. So we moved away from those two, and we move on to Finn Balor. And again, love Finn, love the Demon Balor gimmick, even though he doesn't really break it out these days. And it was interesting because obviously he's a heel at the moment, but it was kind of like, I don't know, it was really well built in some senses, because he's talking about the fact that, you know, he essentially had a bad run on the main roster, and how he wanted to come back essentially to his home. He wanted to come back to NXT. That's where he got that feeling and that love for wrestling, and that's why he came back. And then obviously building towards him versus Walter for the UK title. But it was very one-sided, actually. They didn't seem to show any interest in you know, getting Walter's side of things. But it was good to sort of get a bit of a motivational angle from him. That being said, I preferred face Finn, and I prefer the whole demon thing, and I would love to see him back on the main roster. a slight digression to what this is about. But so that was a bit of a shorter promo, but they sort of built up to that match, and
I think that's one of the biggest problems with NXT at the minute. So I mentioned previously, it's hard for me to give a shit around Ciampa Gargano for the millionth time when Gargano's the bad guy and fucking Tomato is the good guy, because it doesn't make any sense, because Gargano is a fantastic good guy and Ciampa is a fantastic bad guy. So when you do the role reversal, it's not believable. I feel like with Finn, this is what's happening here again. Walter is a fucking badass. He's a monster. Like he should be the bad guy and Finn should be the good guy, and it should be the plucky underdog of Finn going back to the UK and trying to, not like he's coming down there as the heel. It doesn't make any sense, especially when his opponent's Walter.
It doesn't. And we've known Finn for too long. You can see Finn on social media, and I know we shouldn't, it's all kayfabe and all that, but social media exists. The world knows that you can see what Finn's up to in that sense, and he's a happy, smiley. No offense, Finn, but he's a happy, smiley goon on all of his Instagram and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? So to try and then sell him as a heel on the show, it's that sort of disconnect, isn't it? And you go, well, Walter is a monster. It just doesn't feel right. I totally agree with you. But so we had that promo. That was nice. And then we move on to a promo, which do you know what this is? This is literally like they've gone, you know what's always good? Promos, because they put a lot of them into Raw, and this was just all promos. Anyway, so they build up, and again, this is another one, very much like the first one, that it was very useful for me, but probably a bit boring for everyone else, and that was building up Charlotte versus Ripley. So it was more about Rhea, which is, again, useful because I know Charlotte, I know where she come from, I know what she's been doing because I've been watching the main shows. But Rhea, I actually didn't know she started out in NXT UK, so that was educational. So it sort of showed her build up and her sort of initial, when she first started out, a comparison to Charlotte and how she's had to build her own image and so on. And again, it was a good hype build for their match, but probably good for me, not for everyone else who's been there. But yeah, I can't fault it. It was a decent build. It was nice to see more of an interview style rather than just them two coming out and going, "I'm going to beat you. No, I'm going to beat you."
Yeah, I think so. As well,
it was done a bit differently.
You've absolutely got it like spot on there. Where for the casual or the mainstream audience who are going to be tuning into WrestleMania don't know. I've got a fucking clue who Rhea Ripley is. Obviously, they'll get. Oh, Charlotte, even if you don't know or you don't watch wrestling today, you'll get, oh, Charlotte Flair, that's Ric Flair's kid. I get that.
Yeah, even if you don't get it from the name when she moves, you'll go, oh,
it's not a bad thing, I suppose, to use some of this time to, let people get to know who she is and make a believable, opponent for the likes of Charlotte, because realistically, Charlotte's meant, whether it's a third show or not, let's be honest, Charlotte's taking a step down here to go for that title for some reason, so it's not really believable that she would lose. Yeah. So I think to spend some time in making you believe that, she is something, or, she is a worthy adversary for Charlotte is not bad.
No, I totally agree. And yeah, for me, it was a decent promo. And surprisingly, Karl, for NXT, that's all she wrote. What I found really odd, before we move on to the next, is the fact that, and I get that they couldn't necessarily hold the celebration, but they gave absolutely no time to the NXT champion, or the build up, the very quick build up to a feud between him and Velveteen Dream, which started last week when he went, "I'm here for the title." Didn't want to build on that any further. They wanted to spend an hour.
I think that seems to be a similar pattern, though. I think you mentioned last week that it was the same on a regular NXT, where they're investing everything into that feud and not into your main champion. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I find it really odd. But what I find even worse here is that they gave them no time. Like, for me, it was like, well, why don't you cut back on the Gargano? God, why do I keep struggling with the surname? Gargano Ciampa promo package, because it's all edited. You can cut some bits out or condense it down a little bit. Why don't you do that and then give? It don't even have to be the same amount of time. Just give an amount of time to build up between Velveteen and Cole. I remembered his name. The very memorable NXT champion, Adam Cole. So that's a little bit of a gripe I had, because it was like, they're the three big things we're going to spend most of the show talking about.
So all being said, how do you think that stacked up?
I'm going to be fair to it and give it a 2, purely because it was weird not having any matches, but I preferred the promos and the build-ups to Raw. So I'm gonna be fair. I can't give it any worse than Raw. So I'm gonna be fair to give it a 2.
A little bit different there. So I've got it down as a 1, only simply because I don't need to see 60 minutes worth of something I've seen before. I don't understand the Finn Walter thing. The dynamic of that's just fucking crazy. And the only kind of saving grace for it was the fact that they gave Rhea Ripley a bit of time, but ultimately it wasn't a wrestling show. It was, as you said, it was like a sports center or 60, whatever you want to fucking call it. It wasn't, it wasn't a wrestling show. So for me, I can't really give it any higher than a 1.
Yeah. No, I can understand where you're coming from there. I mean, it'd be like tuning in to watch, and again, I'm not good with these sports analogies because I don't watch any really, but it'd be like tuning in to watch football and then going, well, we've not got any football on here, but we're going to interview the people who you don't really give a shit what they've got to say. Yeah. So it was very unusual. And by all accounts, they've come out pretty quickly and said, no, it's not going to be like that every week. We're going to have some matches, I promise. So
interesting to see whether it follows a similar pattern this week or what happens. But
yeah, so definitely.
The next,
but so that's NXT.
This is a clip from our weekly podcast, A2theK WrestleTalk. The full show can be found on Spotify, Apple, Google, and pretty much anywhere else that you find your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you enjoy.